So is Juliet Holness off limits as a wife of Prime Minister Andrew Holness? This is an interesting one, so make sure you stay tuned and tell me what you think as well. All right, I'm Dion Jackson Miller. Thanks for joining me. Time for tea. Alright, so remember, like the video, share it with somebody you think might be interested, and subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you know anytime I drop a new video. Alright, I interviewed Juliet Holness, in 2016 when she first became Member of Parliament for St. Andrew East Rural. I have to say I was impressed with her from the start, right from the start. I've watched her since then. I'm especially impressed with her at parliamentary committee meetings. She's sharp, she asks pointed questions, and I've never seen her shy away from questioning public servants about the nation's business. We can expect, I think, to see her take an important role in this new JLP administration, and that's why we have to have this conversation. I've even heard people say she's a real possibility to be the next leader of the Jamaica Labour Party. And that's one of the reasons we have to talk about this idea that she's off limits for criticism because she's the wife of Prime Minister Andrew Holness. No, have to say up front, none of that to say that she's done anything wrong. She's never been impugned in anything at all. This is not about her personal integrity, but we do live in a small country, so issues are going to arise. And when the issues arise, we have to deal with them. To deal with them, though, we have to first acknowledge them, and that's not what's been happening here. No, I'm not sure if the people running with this line of argument that Juliet Holness is off limit because she's the Prime Minister's wife actually believe what they're saying, or if they understand what they're saying, or if they've thought about what they're saying, or if they're being disingenuous, because there are several reasons why this argument can't stand up to scrutiny. I'm going to give you 3. 1. Possible conflict of interest issues in relation to development issues. Now, let's start with the issue that was raised during the leadership debate, and this had a lot of people upset. PNP President Mark Golding said there are conflict of interest issues involved with Mrs. Holness being a developer and some of the development approval agencies falling under the Prime Minister's portfolio. So the Prime Minister took issue with this, and a lot of JLP supporters ran in and started cussing and carrying on about how spouses and children are off limits for political criticism. Generally speaking, of course, that's true, but it can't be true in this case. Here's what Mr. Golding said in the debate.
I think it's unfortunate that in the case of Mr. Holness and his wife, they are in the business of real estate development, or certainly she is, and that presents serious conflicts of interest.
And here was the Prime Minister's answer.
He questions my wife's integrity about development. My wife and my family are hard-working Jamaicans. We started off with the taxes like many other Jamaicans, and I have worked hard. He has sought to weaponize that.
I think most people are sympathetic to the idea of a husband defending his wife and standing up for his wife. But in this case, Dr. Holness, no, man, this is not an issue of questioning your wife's integrity at all. And by the way, there have been absolutely no suggestions or reports of impropriety on the part of Juliet Holness. All right, let's get that clear. But this is a question about how to deal with an on the face of it conflict of interest issue. If Mrs. Holness is an active developer, and if it is that her husband is a Prime Minister, which he is, and has been a portfolio minister that has responsibility for development approval agencies like NEPA, the National Environment and Planning Agencies, then a conflict of interest arises on the face of it. So the response needs to be process-driven, not personal. We need to hear, yes, this is on the face of it an issue, this is how it's being dealt with. That's what we need to hear, not the Prime Minister talking about his wife's integrity, not his supporters rushing in to talk about wives being off limit. That's an easy answer, it's populist, it sounds nice, but it's not the right response in these circumstances. The second issue is that Mrs. Holness was Speaker of the House of Representatives in the last Parliament, where her husband, as Prime Minister, was leader of the government side. Now, what happened is that she was elected Deputy Speaker. She became Speaker when the former Speaker, Marissa Dalrymple Philibert, stepped down because of issues with her statutory declarations. And to be fair, there wasn't a whole lot of comment when she was elected Deputy Speaker, maybe because nobody expected her to actually become Speaker. But then she was elevated to the Speaker's chair, and questions and concerns started to be raised. Now, I have to say, here is where the PNP, the opposition, absolutely did not cover itself with glory. In Parliament, they supported and applauded Mrs. Holness's election as Speaker. Then almost immediately, when I say almost immediately, I mean within a couple of days outside of Parliament, they started to raise questions about it. And everybody was like, what the hell? Now, when I spoke to the then leader of opposition business in the House of Representatives, Philip Paulwell, he told me the opposition had supported her election because it's convention, it's practice that the opposition supports the election of whoever the government side chooses as a Speaker. Except though this wasn't a normal situation. And if you actually saw a problem, it can't be that your position is to knee-jerk say, okay, because a convention we're supporting it, and then the next day or the next couple of days now to start cuss it. That just makes you look silly, and it did make them look very, very silly. And in fact, we did see issues in the Parliament where first the former Speaker, Mrs. Dalrymple Philibert, and then Mrs. Holness as Speaker were trying to change the habitual practices of how reports that came from the Integrity Commission and the Auditor General were immediately tabled in Parliament. And that was problematic for all kinds of reasons, but particularly because a report was expected at some point on the Prime Minister himself. And for those reasons, the conflict of interest issues, the power that the Speaker has, having gone through the last Parliament, Mrs. Holness definitely should not be elected Speaker in this current Parliament. The third reason is simply that Mrs. Holness isn't just a non-political spouse. She's a member of Parliament. She was Speaker of the House. She's a public figure in the politics and Parliament in her own right. So this idea of her being off limits is really kind of curious because by definition, she is within limits. So at what point do you say, okay, she's the Prime Minister's wife here, she can't be brought up, she can't be spoken of, and at what point do you say she's a public figure and she can be criticized? It's an untenable distinction they're trying to make, and as I said, it's one that doesn't hold up to scrutiny. By the way, for anybody who was wondering why I put Mrs. Holness in quotation marks in the thumbnail caption, that's why. I'm making the point that she's not any other political spouse. You can't treat her like that. You can't put her in the same category. I mean, what I would say is, as with everything else, the criticism, the comment, everything has to be clean and above board, right? You don't want people going down into the gutter. You don't want people getting nasty. And I certainly haven't heard anything nasty said about Juliet Holness. She's well respected. She's a strong woman. She's a woman who I suspect we're going to be seeing and hearing a lot more of at the very highest levels of politics and Parliament. In fact, I suspect if it were anybody else, would already have seen her in the cabinet, except for the fact that her husband is the Prime Minister. And the fact that that may have been a consideration should tell you that this particular discussion isn't being framed through the correct lens. Juliet Holness is one of 19 women out of 63 members of Parliament in the lower house after the 2025 general election, and yes, representation matters. We do want more women in the house. I certainly want to see more women in the house, but not just women for women's sake. We want strong women, want outspoken women, want informed women, and Juliet Holness is all of those things. As I said to you, I was impressed from the first time I heard her speak, the first time I interviewed her just after she entered Parliament. And there are people who will say to you that out of the two of them, meaning out of Andrew Holness and Juliet Holness, that she in fact is a more savvy political strategist. So when the critics rush in and they start foaming and frothing at the mouth, as they tend to do, and of course when I say critics here, I mean the partisan critics, they're not doing either Andrew Holness or Juliet Holness any favors, because there are clearly issues here that do need to be addressed, that do need to be discussed in a mature and responsible manner, and that's what we need to do, address and discuss them in a mature and responsible manner. Sticking your head in the sand and pretending there aren't issues doesn't benefit the governance. It doesn't benefit anybody concerned in this matter. All right, so I'm going to leave it there. As always, thank you so much for watching. Like the video, share it with somebody who might be interested, subscribe to the channel, and of course, click that notification bell so you know anytime I drop a new video. I'm Dion. Thank you so much for watching. Back to my tea.